What's going on, everybody? JT here. We've got C-Will. We've got David. This is episode 65 of The Next Block, and on it we have a fantastic guest. We've got Sebastien Guillemot of Pyma Studios. He's also the founder of DC Spark, from the company that created Milkamada, the sidechain for Cardano, as well as the rollup for Algorand, the EVM rollup that is. And we're super excited to have this conversation because for those that don't know, Pyma is a Web3 engine to help builders create all sorts of different blockchain games in the space. I believe it's focused on Cardano currently, but we'll have that conversation. We'll figure out what it's all about. And I think without further ado, actually, before we do it, smash that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, share this video with a friend so that way everybody gets to watch it. And if you're watching after the live show, hit us up in the comments down below with what your favorite part was. And now, without further ado, let's bring on our esteemed guest, Sebastian. How you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, not a problem at all. So I know a lot of our audience is pretty excited about this. They're excited that we're having a lot more cross-chain conversations because we are a little bit Algorand centric here, but we're trying to branch out. And I know Pyma Studios is focused largely currently on the Cardano ecosystem. And we're all just really excited to hear what you have to say. So I'd love to know high-level overview. What is Pyma Studios?
Yeah, great question. So as we were working on Milkamida, which for those who don't know is this roll-up for Algorand for EVM compatibility, we noticed that the space for like DeFi focused layer twos was really, really crowded. And not only is it really crowded, like from a regulatory perspective, DeFi was very much on the downtrend. It still kind of is to this day because of all the crackdown. And so we decided that we should probably pivot to something that nobody else is doing. And right now, everybody who is building on like layer twos was really focused on the DeFi use case. And we saw like a huge potential in gaming because we saw a lot of NFT projects like wanting to get into gaming. Like they've built a brand, they've built some kind of IP that they now own, and they want to like expand the IP and increase user retention and user engagement. And games are a great way to do that. And so that's how we started Paima Engine, which is this framework for easily building, Web3 games. And notably, like we're fairly different from what you might have seen before because a lot of like the frameworks that exist right now are for something called Web 2.5 gaming, which is that you as a user own the NFT, but you do not own the in-game progress. All the in-game progress is stored on some centralized server, which is not only not ideal as a player, because like then you don't own the progress in many game, which is like the entire point. But also it's not great from a security perspective because you get instances like Axie Infinity where the centralized server for their game gets hacked and everybody loses their money. And so we wanted to build a framework that not only allows Web 2.5 games, but actually allows like fully autonomous worlds where there's no company or person that needs to be in charge of maintaining this world state.
That's really interesting. How do you pull that off? Because you're absolutely right. A lot of blockchain games, if you will, they sort of use elements of Web3, but they're still very much so Web2 based. And yeah, I always thought that was also a pain point in the growth of blockchain gaming as well. But how did you reach that point where people can, have ownership of their played state as opposed to just like their NFT character and this open world concept you speak of?
Yeah, sure. So we spent quite a bit of time like looking into all the different things people are doing and seeing what the main pain points are. In my experience, there's four major pain points. The first one is like it's hard to write like on-chain games. Like if you have to go to an NFT, like how to say, most like entrepreneurs who create an NFT project, they're not developers. They're usually artists. If you go to them and say like you have to use like Teal or you have to use Solidity or Plutus, one of these languages, like it's just way outside of their existing tool set. And then also like they're really scared of getting hacked because they see what's happened to other projects like build a smart contract and they get hacked and it absolutely destroys their NFT project. And so they don't want to make the same mistake. Third one is user acquisition. Like if you build a game for Algorand, for example, like you will probably quickly get to the point like if you're successful you'll hit saturation, which is like everybody in the Algorand community knows you, everybody who's wanted to play your games already played, and it's hard to like expand beyond that ecosystem. Other than maybe if like you grow Algorand itself, but like usually NFT creators are like good at marketing their NFT project, not necessarily good at marketing like Algorand, right? So they
Right.
like to like focus on their strength, which is like growing their brand. And then last one is like iteration speed. Like I've seen a lot of projects where they spend a lot of money, a lot of time to like write these smart contracts, deploy it, and then people just don't like it. And they're like, ah, fuck, like to change this, I need to like rewrite the smart contract and spend a lot of money and then like hope it goes better. So we saw these like, 4 key issues in like the gaming space. And so to really enable people to like easily and safely build these games, that's how we build Paima Engine. So now that you know like the background on like the issues people have, we can talk about how we solve this. So a lot of it is kind of taking inspiration from our work on Milkamita, in the sense that like Milkamita added EVM support to Algorand, even though Algorand is not an EVM based chain. But you can do this with things other than EVM, right? So for Pyma, we allow you to build your games using JavaScript and then deploy them on chain. So you don't have to go learn like Solidity or Teal or Plutus. And so this is like much easier, entry for game developers. And JavaScript has much better compatibility with existing game engines. Almost every game engine nowadays has some kind of JavaScript plugin. And then we made these games non-custodial. So that means it's like, for example, if you wanted to use Milkamita, first you have to bridge your algo to Milkamita, then use a dApp. And this is like not a great user experience. And so for Pyma, what we decided to do is that the user funds stay on the layer 1. The benefit of this is that it means even if the game gets hacked or the game gets shut down, like user assets are not at risk. And you also get to use the layer 1 like marketplace liquidity. Like if you list it on OpenSea or something, if your game's on Ethereum, you can take advantage of the Ethereum layer 1 NFT marketplace or the Algorand NFT marketplace and so on. So it gives you much better access to this liquidity as well. We also focus a lot on user acquisition, which is kind of how Algorand comes in. So as you mentioned, like we started in the Cardano ecosystem. But it's what you might not know is that actually Pyma is all EVM based. And the way we have Cardano support is through the system we built for account abstraction, where we allow people to play with Cardano wallets, even though the game's on EVM. So from a Cardano user perspective, you use your Cardano wallet, you're playing with your Cardano wallet, you sign transactions in your Cardano wallet, but actually all this is running on EVM chain. And that's how also we added Algorand wallet support, I think maybe about 2 weeks ago. So similarly, you can play these games with an Algorand wallet as well, even though it's actually running on EVM.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to go ahead. Do it, guys. Will.
No, I just wanted to comment on that sounds great. And can you kind of go a little bit more deeper into the fee structures of how that works? Because David, I know you just tried out playing one of the games with the Algorand wallet. Can you talk also more about that experience? Or you first, Sebastian, sorry.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. So like the great thing about Pyma is that the games, by leveraging layer 2 technology, are really cheap. Like the cost of running this tower defense game, the one that maybe you played, for its entire lifetime is maybe a few $100s. So it's like super cheap, which means that like we as a company, we can just subsidize the transaction fees for everybody. So it means that you as a player, like you don't have to deal with the layer 1 transaction fees because we just cover it because it's cheap enough for us to do so.
That's interesting, then, because I was noticing that when I was playing the tower defense game, I was signing the transactions on my Para wallet, but obviously, it's nothing. There wasn't actually anything coming out, and I didn't have to load up my wallet or anything to play it. Now I do know the other game, which I was, just kind of experimenting with Jungle Wars. You did need the, I guess, Milkamita ADA or wrapped ADA to kind of participate in that, or maybe it was to buy the NFTs, the Vulcaneer NFTs. But I will say, and this is just kind of going back to I am a gamer, right? And I always wonder, you're talking about the friction points, right? And actually getting people over to Web3 gaming, true Web3 gaming. And I noticed, just while playing, not every action, but when you're when you start a round, right, you're having to sign those transactions. Is that something that's always going to persist in this, in Web3 gaming, or is that just a pain point that we have right now?
Yeah, so as you might have pointed out, like a lot of the platform is still being built. So some of the features we had for this earlier game, you mentioned Jungle Wars, were solved in Tower Defense. So if like for Jungle Wars, you had to pay for the transaction fee because we didn't have the account abstraction system built yet. We do have that for tower defense. And for the next game we're working on, which is called Torochi, which is a on-chain RPG game. So all your monsters, your points, everything is all on-chain. And if you list one of these monsters on NFT Marketplace, people can actually see like the level, the health points, the move set, the entire history of the monster.
Yeah, it's almost like Pokemon.
And for this game, we are planning to release an auto sign system, so you don't have to manually approve the transactions to get auto signed. Now, the thing you might think of is like, well, auto sign, that sounds dangerous. Like, won't they just steal all my algo or all my ETH or something? But the interesting thing about Pyma is that every game is its own layer 2. So every game, every app built with Pyma gets spun up as its own layer 2. And the reason this is important is because it means that when you auto sign, you accept to auto sign for a specific layer 2. Okay, you're saying for this game, I will auto sign. Because every game has a different transaction format. And the transaction format is different from what you'd have on Ethereum, what you'd have on Algorand, and so on. It means that auto signing for one game is like sandboxed to that specific game and cannot be reused for anything else. So that game cannot steal your funds in any other environment.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because sometimes, I do blockchain transactions and I do not like signing up to 10 times to get something done. So that's a great idea. A big question for me, why a layer 2? Because there's so many layer 2s for like everything. Like, why a layer 2 and not just, I guess, committing to one blockchain to build on?
Yeah, so there's a few key things. Like, one, this auto sign experience is only like safely possible because we're a layer 2, because every game is like sandbox in its own environment, so it allows us to have like this safe auto sign behavior. It also allows us to switch the execute environment. Like, if we did not have a layer 2 system, like, you'd have to write your game in Solidity or TL or Pluto, so you'd have to use one of these languages. These are not made for gaming. These are made for, DeFi. So it'd be like a large friction point for developers. And so, like, being layer 2 allows us to have more flexibility and more safety than we'd have as like a native layer 1 experience. We also like have some performance gains on this that are quite significant, even though that's not our like core goal. Like, mostly it's like an interoperability solution more than like a scalability solution. But the nice thing about Pyma is that we also support parallel execution. So unlike EVM, where you have to process stuff one at a time, like in Pyma, you can actually process multiple user transactions in parallel, kind of like how Solana is like much faster because that's parallel execution. So it's kind of a similar system for Pyma as well.
Yeah, I was about to ask that, is like, how does, because you're still using EVM and you're kind of working through multiple blockchains, how is each person's user experience the same if they're signing on a wallet that might be different, or might take longer, or chain one, the layer 1 blockchain that someone's using might be slower or faster than another chain? I guess, how does that all, I guess, cohesively go into the games that get built here to where each user is still having the same user experience?
Yeah, and so the goal of Pyma is basically to build a modular gaming stack. So if you've seen a lot of like other solutions in the market, they often really force you into a single ecosystem. They say like you have to be on BNB chain and you have to use like this system and you have to use this and you have to use this. Whereas Pyma is like a lot more flexible and we empower the developers to pick what they want. So they can say like, okay, my game settles to Milkamita and then uses an NFT from Cardano and then supports Polkadot wallets. And then like you kind of like pick and choose which layers you want to integrate into your game. And so this is a choice you make as a developer. So every game is on like its own environment. And so you could have one game in Polygon and another game in BNB chain, another game in Arbitrum, another game in Oasis, like deployed on all these different chains. So it's up to developers to choose where they want to deploy. And for you as a user, it shouldn't matter as much for the initial experience. There's like 2 steps. There's like playing the game and then buying an NFT for the game. So currently we support like the playing the game cross chain. The buying the NFT cross chain is like the next step we're working on.
Nice. And then the games currently that are out there, are these games that Pyma Studios the developers, or the guy you and the team behind it are building for it, or are there any games that are actually from just outside developers that are looking and using your all's technology?
Yeah, great question. So Tower Defense and Jungle Wars and Trochi are all games that we've built. For example, like tower defense, as you might notice, it's free, so there's no like real monetization for it because it's primarily like a demo to show that you can build full games with Pyma that are fun and enjoyable. We have other companies using our technology as well. About 20 projects or so. Some of them games, some of them are more in the gamification side. So if you think about like traceability, carbon credits, like these kinds of systems, they're all game-like experiences. So we have a few companies both in the gaming and like gamification area using our platform as well.
Go for it, Sibo.
I was just interested in the go back to the stateful NFTs. So is this stateful in the sense of immutable? And I know you kind of broke it down more, but like earlier we were talking about using, like, for example, they have the NBA basketball game 2K Live or NBA 2K, and we're talking about like if we could use a 2014 version of a character in like a 2023 video game, would NFTs help establish something like that in the game? Or can you just speak on stateful NFTs?
Yeah, sure. So like Pyma at its core is kind of an NFT compression algorithm. And the reason this is important is because for any non-trivial game, you're going to need a lot of in-game like data. Like you might have items and equipment and characters and like levels and all this kind of stuff that all needs to exist. And if you have to mint NFTs for all of these, like oftentimes it's going to cost you a fortune. It not only is going to cost you a lot in like mint costs, it also makes it really hard to modify your game. Like I mentioned earlier, like a lot of games, like they pre-mint the NFTs before they release the game. For example, for card games, they'll pre-sell the cards for the game and deploy the game, and then they realize, oh shit, like my cards are not balanced. Like this one's too strong, this one's too weak, or blah blah blah. But they already like minted and sold the cards, and it's hard to change stuff afterwards. So we noticed that like to solve this mint issue and to solve like the flexibility issue, we need something that's like more flexible. And so we came up with this kind of NFT compression algorithm called stateful NFTs. And what it allows you to do is you can have a single NFT on the layer one. That's kind of like, for example, a user account. And then on the layer two, you write data like the user items, the equipment, this kind of information, and then you associate that to their NFT. So their NFT like levels up or like evolves based off their actions on layer two. And this not only like lowers the costs, it also makes it much easier to modify, and also like makes it much easier to reward in-game actions. Like we've talked to some Web 2.5 games that say like, oh, like I want that like when the users play my game, they get like a daily reward, and their daily reward is like a new NFT they receive as like an encouragement for them to come play. But now they have to like go buy, like we have to pay like the mint cost of an NFT like every time they come play the game, and then we're spending too much money on recurring users. And as a business, as you might know, like you want to spend the least amount of money on your recurring users and all your money on new user acquisition. So like there's kind of like a disconnect here. With Pyma, because it's all on chain, you can have their single account NFT, and that updates every time they come and play the game on a daily basis. You don't have to like pay that mint cost again every time. So it allows for like these more interactive and evolving experiences.
How many games are currently available to be played with Pyma Studios?
Yeah, so right now it's just the core two that we mentioned earlier, Jungle Wars and Tower Defense. There's some other games that are coming out live this month. Some of them are like more demos by us. Some of them are by other companies. So you'll see kind of like growth. Of course, like games take a few months to build.
Right.
So like naturally, like when people partner with us, usually takes a few months before their project goes live. And actually, to actually speed this up, we've been spending a lot of time building templates. So for example, we just released like a Web 2.5 template. So if anybody wants to build a playthrough experience, like we have a template for that. We're soon releasing a dice game, like a board game template. And then hopefully at the end of this month, we'll release like a card game template as well. So we're building all these templates so people who want to build something can just easily get right into it and build their game as fast as possible.
Okay, just a little vision wise, what is an ideal game that you would like to see built on blockchain?
Yeah, and I can talk about like the North Star, like why are we doing this, right? Obviously there's like, a lot of interest in, like building on-chain games and ownership of progress and this kind of stuff. But like our vision kind of goes beyond this. And there are kind of North Stars, something called autonomous worlds. And to kind of describe what this is, first we have to talk about metaverse and why metaverse didn't really work out. Like we saw, as you probably know, like in the last bull run, a huge amount of NFT projects were like metaverse projects. And basically all of them failed. Some of them because they were like explicit scams. Some of them because they just didn't realize like how hard this is going to be, right? And instead we saw that metaverse like ended up being controlled by like centralized large companies, like Oculus, obviously, like through Facebook, Meta has like their Horizon World, and then there's other projects like VR Chat. But these are like owned by central companies. There's no like Web3 element in any of this, and it's not really what we want from a metaverse. Like, I don't want to like retire and like have to live my virtual life in some environment controlled by Facebook. Like that's like hyper dystopia for me.
Right.
And so we wanted to kind of like build like a fully decentralized, experience like this. But the word metaverse is like polluted at this point. Like if you say something like you're working on metaverse, like it's a negative because of people associate with the scams and Facebook. It's just a negative connotation. And so the kind of new word that's come to replace it is autonomous world. And the reason I really like this term is because it encodes like two key principles inside it. First one is that it's decentralized, because you can't say it's an autonomous world if it's controlled by a central company, right? It just doesn't match up. So it has to be like a decentralized experience powered by some kind of like experience like blockchain. And the other thing that's really interesting is it also kind of encodes the idea of AI, right? Because if it's an autonomous world that's evolving over time, like how does the world grow, right? Of course, there's like user progress, but most games like want something beyond just user interactions. And so it kind of like makes you think like, well, what if there's like an AI that helps craft the story and evolve the story as it goes on? And it kind of like touches into that quite a bit as well. And so when we were working on Pyma, there's like other people working kind of like similar ideas, and this kind of term autonomous world came up. And we spent a lot of time thinking like, well, what does it take to get a real autonomous world? Not like, obviously like Art Defense is really interesting because it's like one of the most complex on-chain games written to date. But like, how do we get to like this, full autonomous world experience? And we figured, well, there's one thing we need, which is the core engine itself. That's what Paima Engine is meant to be. We also need like privacy and the ability to prove world state to other people. And so that's how we started Zeko, which is our recent ZK rollup project we just announced in partnership with Mina. And it's a ZK rollup that is actually private. So if you call a smart contract, people cannot tell your inputs to the smart contract, which is great because it allows to prove state about the world without necessarily revealing information about it. And then we also talked to some people that wanted to do like AI integration to their games. And we built a proof of concept of this called Oracle RPG, which was a decentralized ChatGPT, like as an MMO. The way we built this is that you create a lobby with your friends and you get a stateful NFT to represent your character. And as you talk with your friends, your NFT visually updates to represent your in-game adventure. So if you say like, I enter a forest, like your NFT will visually update to show your character in the forest. This is really awesome because like not only can you play like an interactive text experience with your friends, like your NFT stays in your wallet after you're done the game. It's kind of like a souvenir of your experience with your friends, which I thought was really cool. And we showed this to a few companies like wanting to build like decentralized games. And a lot of them would tell us like, we want like more than this. Like this is obviously super cool, but like what we want is like a village where it's like there's NPCs in the village and they somehow like talk to each other and perform actions in the game world. And can we take like this proof of concept you built and like scale it up to this kind of experience? And of course, like this is much more complicated to do on a blockchain. Like the amount of calculations that happen and coordination that's happen is just like really expensive and complex. And so we started another project called Shinkai Network, which is a platform for decentralized peer-to-peer AI that have these AIs tied to an identity on-chain as an NFT. So what you do is you build out a game where all the NPCs in the game have an NFT representing their in-game identity, and then they can coordinate through a peer-to-peer network to talk to each other about like potential actions. And when they decide to do something like move to this building or purchase this item in game, then they can like synchronize that on chain like with their NFT identity. So it's a project we started about 2 months ago. And so like the idea is to combine the work we're doing with Pyma with Zeko with Shinkai to all like build towards this kind of autonomous world infrastructure.
Yeah, that's wild. Just hearing like how you explain that. I mean, one, it's just that last bit too. I was just like, AI getting together and just trying to decide what what we're gonna do in a world. Even when all the hype of metaverses and stuff was going on in the last bull market, I wasn't really getting sucked into it too much because like everything you went out and tested, like you were kind of saying, it was centralized. If you went out and played Decentraland, one, everything was hella expensive because mana had rocketed in price, and so it's like there was nothing there. Yeah, you could run around and see cool stuff and see people's NFTs in the metaverse, but it's like you could tell it was just all fancy show, and it's like the idea that I had when thinking, even before all this stuff, like a decent, I don't even know if I was thinking decentralized, but just a open world or autonomous world is like where you could literally, like when NFTs, when I first started getting into them, I guess I should say, is like I could buy an NFT or get an NFT that I associate myself with, right? Whether I'm say it's an Iron Man looking figure, or say it's like I just want to be old school Pac-Man running around in a space, right? And then like I could literally jump into a world that's open to anybody and everybody, and literally just create whatever I want to create in that world. Like, but being someone who's not a developer, like you were kind of saying, having like an AI tool, having something there that like you pop into this world and almost like something's there to help you build exactly what you want to build, even if you didn't have any experience for developing. Like that's my idea, or what my always, I guess you could say the North Star of what I thought video games should come to. Almost kind of like a Wreck-It Ralph, but like you're just like submersed, like you can just go visit other people's worlds, right? I mean, I feel like that's the idea that everybody kind of has. But no, it's really cool to hear what you guys are building. It sounds awesome, and it sounds like it especially the decentralized aspect of it. That's what I feel like is probably going to be the hardest hurdle maybe to actually get, but it's one that's needed because, like you said, having something that's centralized where one single, one company goes down, or a hack happens or something like that, and then everything that's been built or worked on is gone.
Yeah, I want to add to that too, or talk about decentralization more. What is the vision of decentralization, and kind of what do y'all define it as? Because we're seeing a lot of even like Algorand says it solves the trilemma, and I might say it's on the way of solving the trilemma: decentralization, scalability, and security, right? So how do you define decentralization, and is this part using like nodes with Amazon Web Service, Azure? Like where are we going?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that, and I'll maybe bring it like a bit deeper into the tech so that you have like some good understanding, and hopefully the viewers will still be interested in like, I won't go like super technical, don't worry about it, but like give you some insight.
Yep.
So to start that, like let's say, what is a mathematical function? Like what are the key properties? There's three things you care about: function inputs, function definition, and function outputs. Okay. Now let's think of this in the context of, for example, an optimistic rollup, for example, optimism or arbitrum. So for these optimistic rollups, the inputs are on-chain, and those are your transactions. The function definition is on-chain. That's your Solidity smart contract. And the function outputs are on-chain. That's the result of your execution, and that's what's used for the fraud proofs in an optimistic rollup. Okay. Now let's look at this in the context of a ZK rollup. So in the ZK rollup, the inputs can be on-chain. So for example, in a lot of like the ZK rollups today, they're on-chain, but some platforms like Zecco, I talked about earlier, the inputs are private, so they're not really like on-chain. The circuit definition is on-chain. That's the ZK circuit. And the function output is on-chain. That's the proof, the ZK proof. Okay. Now, Pyma is something different. It's called a sovereign rollup. Sovereign rollup is kind of the opposite of ZK. So function inputs are on-chain, function definition is off-chain, and function output is off-chain. So the only thing that's actually on-chain is the inputs. So what does that actually mean? For example, if you're using Algorand, in this context, you would be posting all the game inputs as boxes, like box storage or like transaction nodes. So all the information for the game gets posted in there. Now, the game itself is a client that you run on your local machine or somebody else runs. And you can think of this as kind of like the difference between a physical board game and a digital video game. In a digital video game, like the rules are set by the game creator. like this is how the game's going to work. Like you press this button, this happens, that's it. For a physical board game, it's as long as you agree with your friends on the rules, everybody's happy. Like they might say like, oh, this is how Monopoly gets played, but like once you come with your friends together, you could say like, oh, like I really like this variation of the rules, this is more fun, and then as long as you all agree, you all get to play. So with this context in mind, like for Pyma, the inputs are on chain, the function definition, the game client itself is off chain. But if everybody's agreeing to interpret the same inputs the same way, you get the same result. Okay. And so in Pyma, the output of the state machine is what powers the stateful NFT system. So this state machine, this game client, outputs like these updates to player identities, player NFTs, and that's what you use to like update the NFTs over time. So what's really interesting about this is that means that at any time somebody could come in and propose a new rule to the game. So like actually like interpret this data this new way, or this new kind of data should have this effect. And so we could come in and propose a new rule, and if that becomes like the dominant rule that everybody agrees on, then the world can like update to encode this new rule in place. So it gives this flexibility, and also means that there's no like new actor, there's no centralized AWS server you have to trust in. All you need to play the game is, for example, synchronize your EVM node or your Cardano node or your Algorand node, wherever that game is run. You synchronize the node, you find all the data related to this game, you feed it to your local client, and you get the result. So there's no like extra server that you have to trust, no extra like sequencers you have to trust. As long as you sync the underlying blockchain, you get full access to the game experience.
Thank you for that. Okay. I understand most of it, I'll say there so far. Definitely the roll-ups and all that makes a lot of sense to me. But so follow-up, then it seems like it would still kind of rely on what the underlying blockchain is doing then in that sense.
Yes. So we want to empower you as a developer to choose which blockchain you want to use.
So then they're
So
like, okay, yep, whatever's they feel like using.
Yeah, so you could choose to deploy your game on Ethereum, or choose to deploy your game on Arbitrum, or any other blockchain in the future. Currently, we only support EVM chains as like the underlying place where the data is stored, just because every blockchain nowadays has some EVM layer, be it because they're EVM directly or they're EVM indirectly, like Algorand, for example.
And is this kind of what Pyma Whirlpool is?
So Pyma Whirlpool is a way to like convert these other transaction formats from different places to things that are compatible with Pyma system. And that's how we build like this account abstraction system. So like if you make an Algorand transaction for Pyma through your Algorand wallet, Pyma Whirlpool will help wrap that into an EVM transaction to be compatible with the Pyma like core system.
Gotcha. Okay, what's the workload like for y'all? Because it sounds like you have a lot of projects and you guys are doing some, revolutionary stuff in this space that's already revolutionary. And can you speak on your team and what's your workload like, and how do you manage these so many projects?
Yeah, good question. So there's, in a sense, 4 companies involved in this. There's DC Spark, Pyma, Zeko, and Shinkai. And these are all like separate legal entities. Of course, I cannot personally be involved in all these projects. There's only 24 hours in a day. I will say that I get very few hours of sleep every day, but I try and balance my time. We have done this by basically like kind of splitting the team up into different components. So like the Shinkai team has very little overlap with the Pyma team and like their day-to-day and the coordination and everything. And the Zeko team is like isolated from the rest of these. And we've also brought in like extra help. So for example, for Zeko, like we knew building an entire ZK rollup ourselves would be like too difficult. So we built the architecture, we wrote the light paper. We have the engineers at DC Spark to work on it. But then we partnered with Mina Foundation and O1 Labs, which are like very well-known companies in the ZK space, to work with them, and they help with like project management and community management and this kind of stuff. So we tried to like split everything up so that everybody working on these projects only has like one concern, which is their specific like team they're part of. And so it's fairly like loosely coordinated between them.
I would say y'all got to just stay organized. Especially, I know time zones too. You're up late right now. I'm up early. And so yeah, that makes sense. JT, you got something?
I don't currently, but I actually do have a couple things starred. And actually, he wasn't lying. He definitely doesn't get that much sleep. I believe it's about 2:40 in the morning currently where he is tuning in. We're super thankful to have this conversation at such hours. But Mr. Joker is talking in the chat about the Vulcaneer game, the NFT. He's of course an algo head, and he's curious if there'll be a point in time where he can pay with algo as opposed to the wrapped ADA. And he said the process was super smooth, no issues at all. He's just an algo head, just a algo maxi that is looking to pay with something else.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe I can talk a bit about like our plans for this.
Sure.
So in the first game, like in Jungle Wars, everybody had to pay for your own transactions. You had to have Milkamita ADA to do this. And Tower Defense, it's easier because now it's free, right? So you don't have to go buy ADA. You can play from your Algorand wallet, and that's it. But there's still a problem, which is when you want to go buy an NFT for the game, to buy the NFT now you have to go get ADA. So you haven't solved the problem. You're just like delaying it like one step down the line. So the next thing we're working on is cross-chain NFT support for games. So right now, when you play a game, usually the game requires you to have an NFT on a specific chain to play the game. And this is not great, not only because it like limits the reach of potential customers, but also because it often creates like a difficulty in monetizing your game. And to explain why, like think about Ethereum. All the NFT marketplace liquidity on Ethereum is on Ethereum layer 1. There's of course like Arbitrum that has an NFT marketplace. The volume is like basically zero, right? So we have a lot of projects that say like I have an NFT collection on Ethereum layer 1, but I can't deploy my game here. It's too expensive. So I want to deploy my game to Arbitrum. But if I deploy my game to Arbitrum, like I'm leaving my community behind. And if I deploy an NFT for my game, like there's zero volume anyway. Like there's this kind of like disconnect here. And so for Pyma, we are building a way to basically access NFTs from different chains inside your game without requiring a bridge. We initially were thinking about building an NFT bridge solution, but we talked to a lot of people and nobody was interested in NFT bridging. And so we decided to like pause any work on NFT bridges because it's just the feedback was really negative. And so we instead focused on building a system to basically like have cross NFT support. The way we did this, in case you're curious, is Pyma basically works as like a cross-chain layer 2. So to explain what that means is first thing about like layer 2s that exist now. All the layer 2s that exist now are primarily like layer 2s for a specific ecosystem. We're a layer 2 for Ethereum, a layer 2 for Polygon, a layer 2 for BNB chain. They're layer 2s for like a specific blockchain. And recently we've seen the growth of like 2-chain layer 2s. They say like, for example, we're a layer 2 for Ethereum, but part of the data lives on Celestia. Right. So now to like fully get the full state of the layer 2, you actually need like to synchronize 2 different chains. One chain for some of the data, another chain for the other part of the data. If you don't know Celestia, by the way, it's like a data layer for layer 2 solutions for rollups primarily and validiums. Just like as a side note for people who want to learn more. And so Pyma kind of takes that as a step further, which is like, okay, you want to build a game? Sure. First decide where your game lives, but then also you can decide where you want the data to be stored, and then you can decide which chain the NFTs live on. So you can actually like monitor multiple chains and like aggregate the state of multiple different layer 1 blockchains, different environments together. So it means that like, for example, if we had Algorand NFT support, you could use your Algorand wallet buying Algorand NFTs to play the game, even though the game runs in like some totally separate chain. So it means from a user perspective, all the monetization components are all just paid purely in algo, and all your liquidity for the NFT is purely in algo ecosystem. So you don't even know that the game itself is powered by some other ecosystem.
Yeah, and I guess like how it, you were saying the North Star, autonomous worlds, like what would that even look like for currencies and how it would be done in something like that? If like someone just comes in, they got their wallet, and they're signing transactions, they can just sign, I guess the end goal would be to buy any NFT or any asset in the game, just with any currency with any wallet they have, or what does that look like?
Yeah, definitely payment rails is a very hard problem, as well as beyond just payment rails, also like DAOification of the project. Like right now, Pyma runs as a central company, right? It's Pyma Studios, the company managing the system. And the business model of Pyma is similar to the business model of like every game engine, which is free to use. But if you build something in Pyma and you cross the revenue threshold, then you have to pay some kind of royalty. But we can't like be an autonomous project if we're like a central company is managing like the core engine being used. Like there's kind of like a disconnect here. So our goal is to like DAOify Pyma itself, and have like an ecosystem like for that. But then like how do we cross chainify Pyma itself? Like sure we can have a Pyma token to do this, but then like where does the token live, right? And so like this kind of like cross-chain DAO and how to handle like payments across these different layers is definitely an area we are super interested in. We know a few ways it can be done, but a lot of these are like 2-year roadmap items that like we know the tech to do it, we know how it could be done, but it's like beyond the scope of what we would be able to handle as a single company. We know like people working on the different components that need to come together, and like these might come together into like a year or two. So we're kind of like gearing ourselves up to tackle these problems and finding the right strategic partners to work towards that goal. But obviously, for Pyma, the important thing is one step at a time. First building MVP, the cross wall support, the cross NFT support, and the future like the cross payment support and the DAOification, and slowly over time moving towards this autonomous world system with the AI and all this other components that we're working on.
Yeah, and obviously what you guys have already built is really cool. I mean, I love the fact that now with the Algorand, I was easily, without having any experience on your all's website today was, first time looking at the games, I was able to click on it, saw, the game that you guys had out there, click connect, saw Para wallet, connected my wallet, and I was playing the tower defense game, within 5-10 minutes. So definitely, very frictionless there. And a much needed thing for, say someone popped in, they're like, oh, I have a MetaMask, or I have, my wallet's on Cardano, or whatever it is. It's definitely cool to see stuff like that. And I hope that, there are developers who see what you guys are building and use that tech.
We've got a question
we're
from
definitely looking for more partners. So if anybody's like listening to this and wants to like use Pyma Engine or help us with the infrastructure, definitely don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, I feel like the only thing, before we get to the question in the chat, the only thing that I was thinking of that is interesting is I know that Fractal Labs, which is the NFT game on Algorand, they're looking to start going cross chain. They hinted at XRP. I don't know exactly what all they have in mind there, but that is one game that I think has done a tremendous job on Algorand. That, I mean, obviously I know they've built their they've already done all their coding and all that stuff in Reach language, but it would be interesting to see if they could somehow use Pyma Engine to implement that cross chain features to where, when people download their game on iPhone or Android, they could connect, create a wallet and create their own account, whether it be on Cardano, Ethereum, and all that, instead of it just having to be creating it on Algorand in the background. So maybe that's somebody that would use Pyma.
Yeah, I would say that's a game changer, because I just want to use my Parrot wallet on every blockchain. Basically, that's where I'm at now. And if y'all can make that happen.
So to get to this question real quick, we've got Super ASA tuning in. How you doing? They're asking, let's see, is there a way to test Pyma integration prior to signing any royalty contracts? Yeah, that's the question right there.
Yeah, great question. So Pyma, because the engine has still like very much been in development and we're still like making a lot of breaking changes, up till today we've been kind of in a developer preview, which is that to say like if you want to use Pyma, you have to reach out to us and we have to come to an agreement and then get something signed and then we gave you access. Obviously, that's not the long-term plan, and we're hoping that we will have the actual engine on GitHub for anybody to use. Hopefully next week is like the current timeline we're working on. I say next week now, but like maybe by the time you're watching this video, it's already live. But so that's our plan to like slowly move stuff more into public hands.
That's awesome. And we got another question tuning in. Well, who are the competitors to Pyma, or are you one of the first in the space to be doing the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say right now there's 4 main companies that you might be interested in looking at. And I think it's interesting is that we're all working towards autonomous worlds, but taking very, very different approaches. So one might be interested in is called MUD, MUD. And MUD is a framework for on-chain games and autonomous worlds that is mostly focused on solidity. So you have to write like all your entities for your game all in solidity. So it's very much like an EVM centric solution. And it's not like a layer 2 system or whatever, it's just like a core solidity framework. The other one is called Dojo, which is purely focused on ZK and Starknet. So it's about how to build like your entire game as like ZK circuits and how to make all that work. So that's 3 now, and then the 4th one is Argus, which is built something called World Engine, which is focused on sharding. Saying like, okay, if you have a really, really popular game, there's no way you could have a single blockchain be fast enough to basically take care of the entire world state. So what if you had some kind of system where you could have like multiple chains that talk to each other and like communicate with each other depending on like the different components of the game? And so these are like I'd say like the 4 key projects right now. And then you might notice that's interesting is that we're all working on totally different tech. Like you could theoretically build a game that uses Argus for the sharding, and then MUD for the slate smart contracts, and then Dojo for the ZK proofs, and then Pyma to power like the evolving NFTs. So it's like really weird that we're all working like kind of competitors in a sense, but like actually you could realistically build a game that uses tech from everybody, which I think is kind of a good sign that we're all like friends in a sense.
Yeah, it shows you that there's a lot of approaches to, solve the same problem, just like there's a lot of blockchains that are solving the same problem.
Yeah. And one question I'd like to, kind of as we're closing out on the show here, is just get your thoughts on, because I think all the time, like, it's not like the big game designers, right, are out here and are not seeing the waves, I guess you could say, starting to be made in this decentralized gaming, Web3 gaming area. Like, in your thoughts, like, why, we kind of hinted at, no one wants to play Facebook's version of the metaverse, down the line one day. But like, I guess what do you think in terms of these big companies, these big AAA game developers? Like, do they care much about the Web3 space and really see it as a threat to them, or do you think they're going to adapt and start creating their own or try to morph into decentralized, I guess gaming platforms and things like that? Or like, what do you see, as because we kind of heard your North Star, type thing, but I'm thinking like, what about Xbox and PlayStation and all these, the game where the games go where like tons of people play them, like, how is that going to change versus like what we have? Like, it just seems like it's a lot of small knit communities and kind of indie type gaming that's trying to, create this decentralized future. But what about the big players?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've talked to a lot of these big companies actually, because I'm based in Japan, where a lot of these companies are also based. So I've met a lot of these people in these companies. I think they're slowly moving in this direction. Originally, they were like, no blockchain at all. This is not like a good for gaming. And then they saw like the success of like Axie Infinity and these other experiences. Like, okay, like actually, like we should do something in gaming. And so like I know many of these large companies in Japan, like Bandai Namco, Sega, Square Enix, Cyber Agents, like Sega, like all these companies have like double digits teams working on like Web3, mostly in like the Web 2.5 space. And they actually host events in Japan and conferences and everything about like what they're building in the Web3 space. So they've already kind of entered, like put their foot in the door to like look at this Web 2.5 experience. I would say a lot of them have hit 2 main issues. One, it's really hard to make the game fun. That might sound like, oh, it's because of like the casino and like it's hard to make like the casino fun. But I don't buy that, because like if you look at a lot of the successful mobile games that are Web 2, they are casinos. Like it's gacha games and like, whatever. Like I don't think that's like a conceptual barrier. I think one of the main issues these projects are hitting is like the iteration speed that I talked about. Like if you make a game and then it's not fun, in the Web2 space, you can easily just iterate on it, put out another update next week, another update next week, another update next week. And you just quickly iterate until you find something that works. But for a lot of these, like, games that have a Web3 component, it's like, oh, like, this is not quite fun. Like, how do we change this? Like, okay, well, we need to, like, go write and use a smart contract and have it re-audited, and that might be done in a month. Like, the iteration loop is, like, really hard to, like, get to a point where you have users actually finding this enjoyable. So I think that's, like, one of the main barriers. The other one is that I've heard multiple, like, companies in Japan talk about, like, the difficulty they have bringing their game global, in the sense that, like, the people in the Asian market are, like, excited about, like, this, Web3 integration stuff, but then they bring it in, like, the English space, and then the comments on, like, Reddit are just, like, absolutely horrible, and they get, like, review bombed on their YouTube videos. Like, just the reaction is absolutely terrible. So I've talked to multiple companies that's like, oh, like, we're thinking of just releasing our game only in Japanese. It'll just be in the Japanese market. Like, we can't, like, just release in this English market. They're gonna go insane. We've also talked to some companies that's like, okay, what we'll do is, like, we'll build some games Japan only, and then we'll, like, license our IP to other companies to use it globally. And then, like, if they get attacked, like, it's their problem, right? So they want to, like, take a step away from the English market. So I think, like, also, like, a barrier to adoption at this point is just, like, the reaction of, like, just towards crypto and just NFTs in general in, like, the English speaking world.
It's so interesting, honestly.
Yeah,
go ahead, Sewell.
Yeah, I'm just curious, right? So I saw an ecosystem partner list on your website, Microsoft. And I keep bringing this up. They're building their own blockchain along with a few other large scale companies for financial infrastructure and whatnot. And then Microsoft is also in the process of buying Blizzard, the gaming company. Do you have any insights on what Microsoft is doing with blockchain?
Yeah, so that was primarily through Japan. So Microsoft Japan used to be, like, one of the large players in, like, the Web3 space here. So they would help Web3 startups in Japan. We've done joint events with them. They would host their own events. They would host, like, meetups and educational spaces, like, all this kind of stuff. Nowadays, they've kind of ramped all that down quite significantly, because, as you might know, like, Satya Nadella, just like their CEO, has made, like, a huge pivot to AI. And it's basically, like, forget every part of Microsoft, not really the AI. Like, it's just, we're an AI company now, basically. So we used to do a lot of stuff with Microsoft Japan. Now, not so much anymore, but just because they've, like, mostly exited the Web3 space. I wouldn't say, like, they've exited 100%. But they used to be, like, a large player in Tokyo. Now, not so much.
AI is a problem. At least for crypto right now. But I do like AI. I feel like it came on way too strong somehow, though.
Oh, man. Well, we're reaching the top of the hour, and I know our guest here, it's about 3 a.m. where he is. So let's wrap up here. But we definitely have more questions going forward. And it seems like you guys have a lot more work to do to build out towards that North Star that you mentioned earlier in the episode. So we'd love to have you back on in the future, ask some more questions, see what's going on, see what's new with the work you're doing as well. And we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Super excited to keep working on this.
Absolutely. We'll keep our eyes peeled, and we'll reach out once we see something interesting, have you back on the show again. And for all of our watchers, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. Hit us in the comments down below with your favorite part if you played any of the games on Pyma Studios. If you're watching on Twitter, give us a like, give us a retweet, or whatever they call it nowadays, that it's actually X, not Twitter, but I'm forever calling it Twitter. I appreciate everyone that tuned in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
See you, everybody.
Peace, y'all.